Today we're going to talk about a counterintuitive way to finish better music faster by working less in the studio. Now this might sound too good to be true, but it's exactly how I finished my latest 13-track album while moving, running a business, and becoming a first-time father. And personally, I think it's my best work to date. But I totally get it. If you've been struggling to finish music that you're really stoked about, I've been exactly where you are, watching tutorials, getting stuck in loops, and only finishing amateur sounding mixes. It can really be frustrating. At first glance, finishing better quality work faster in less time sounds impossible, but I promise you that in this video and the next 3 videos in our series, we're going to completely change the game for you. I've spent years of trial and error to figure this out, and I want to give you the shortcut. So here's exactly how I did it. Number 1 was limiting my options. Number 2 was focusing on quantity over quality to start. And then number 3 was embracing the idea of emergence. So in this video, we're going to break all of these down so you understand them and you can apply them in your own workflow so that you can go ahead and start finishing music faster and easier than you were before. All right, so let's talk about number 1, limiting your options. And when I say this, you might be thinking that, wait a sec, isn't more options better for creativity? More plugins, more samples, more tools, more instruments, etc. But what if I told you that having less options will actually make you more creative and help you make better music? So in this book called The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, psychologist Barry Schwartz estimates that choice has not made us freer, but more paralyzed, not happier, but more dissatisfied. And if you really think about it, if you're scrolling on Netflix or whatever platform you watch content on, right, you spend like 15, 20, 30 minutes scrolling through options instead of just making a decision. Why? Because it's inherently harder to make a decision. So all this is really pointing towards that less really is more. You may have heard this before, but it's super true in practice, okay? And most artists have mastered a very small set of tools, okay? If you think about some of your favorite artists, some of the most legendary bands of all time, chances are they've actually mastered a very small subset of specific tools, right? And if you think about it, most productions that you hear on Spotify, on the radio, your favorite artists tend to only have 4 to 5 main elements, and then they might have a little bit of extra fireworks sprinkled around it. Okay, so let's look at some of the countless bands that only have 4 elements. Bands like Green Day, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nirvana, the list goes on. And if you think about any of your favorite artists right now, right, or any legendary artist that you love, chances are that they're really good at a few specific things. This is a natural byproduct of using less tools. Okay, you get to learn and master them on a deep level. So for example, I've been playing guitar for 15 plus years. I use a push instead of a keyboard because I suck at piano, right? And I can finger drum pretty well. It turns out that these have become the pillars of how I make music, right? And of course, these things ebb and flow over time, right? You change your approach and your techniques and you grow and you develop. But in general, you're going to have some pillars as to how you make music the best, what resonates with you, and what sound that you can create. And then over time, those pillars will be foundational parts of your uniqueness as an artist. If you really think about it, who's forced to be more creative? Somebody with 100 options or somebody with only 10, right? If you only have 10 options, you're forced to be more creative with them, right? And the truth is that you can only make so many decisions in a day because it takes energy. This is called decision fatigue. Okay, so since the creative process is essentially a long series of decisions from the beginning all the way to the end, we want to intentionally limit the scope of our decisions that we have to make. To start off, what I do is I calibrate my instruments. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. And this helps you streamline the entire process. All right, and this is exactly what I do in stage 1 of this system, which is called calibrate. Okay, so let me quickly show you what this looks like. All right, so I've got my overhead here with my push controller, controlling Ableton. And the first thing I want to mention is that it does not matter what tools you use. You could be using an electric guitar, you could be using your vocals, an acoustic, a bass, some other DAW, some other controller, a synthesizer, okay? But the key is that I have boiled down the infinity of options that I can use to something simple that I can work with, that I can start from, and also that is very expressive, okay, because I've designed it that way. So in this case, I have a drum kit here. Cool. I have a bass sound here. Nothing crazy. I have a lead sound here. And I have this kind of pad sound here. Okay, so very quickly, when I load this up, this is just one of the templates that I have. So the key here is that I've simplified my options and I've designed these instruments to be very expressive, okay, in ways that I like to play them, in a way that makes sense for me, and sonically in the direction I want to go musically. But it's super simple. I got a track for drums, right? Cool. I have something for bass, super simple bass sound. I have a sound for lead, and I have a sound for a pad. Okay, so now when I start making music, I have a starting point that just reduces the decisions that I have to make, and I can just get started making music. And the key is that I've made these expressive. So let me show you what I mean. On this drum kit, for example, I can affect the filter, right? If I wanted to, I could change the whole sound of the kit. So I have a lot of sound design capabilities built in because that's the direction I want it to go. Same for the lead. I could actually find a different sound here, right? Lower the filter, up the drive, maybe add some effects. So with this lead instrument, if I go into the instrument, I could toggle between different sounds until I find something I like. I can affect the filter, the drive, right? We could turn up the release so the notes hang around, right? Maybe you want to add a little bit of effects. Right? So I have a lot of sonic flexibility and ways to perform this towards the direction that makes sense for me. And it just limits my options so that when I'm ready to create ideas and jam, I reduce the amount of friction that is required for me to get started to make music. Number 2 is focusing on quantity instead of quality just to start, and hear me out. Usually when I mention this to creators, I hear something back like, I only focus on quality. They tell me that they only want to focus on quality with their music, and usually say something like, I don't want to make subpar music. And I agree with that 100%. And this is exactly how I've worked on music for most of my life. But the truth is that you will make better music if you make more music. Let's explore this study that was done investigating quantity and quality in relation to creativity. And it was titled Quantity Yields Quality When It Comes to Creativity. In essence, it comes to the conclusion that the most effective approach when it comes to creative endeavors is what they call the variation selection model. In other words, allowing yourself the space to explore and create will allow you to create more variation, more ideas, different motifs, key signatures, progressions, riffs, vibes, sounds, etc. Then from that larger sample size of ideas, some of your ideas will be much better than others without having to have had worked any harder on them. Here's why this is so important. If you spend the same amount of time creating 50 ideas as you would in refining your first 5 ideas, you'll 100% have a larger amount of better ideas from the 50. And let me show you a demo of this in practice. All right, so this happened in August of last year when I was moving from the country to the city, became a first-time father, all that kind of stuff. I was super limited on time. So what I decided to do is just jam out ideas with zero focus on quality, which is super counterintuitive. So I just went for volume here, right? Trying to do 3 jams a day for most of a month and a half, 2 months. And I got probably around 80 ideas here. And I just want to show you the distribution of quality that happens with this type of approach and in general. So this is even if you did spend your time on the first 5 trying to make them better. So let me break this down for you. Any idea that has a red circle is, this is decent. There might be something there. Anything with a red and a green circle is, I like this. And then anything with a red, purple, and green circle is like 100% I'm moving this forward. And I just want you to notice, like these are in chronological order, the trend of these ideas. Look, for the first, whatever this is, like 10, all this, it took me this long to get to something that, hey, I like this. And you might argue that maybe if you just spent more time on the first ones, you could have made something that you liked. 100%, I could do that. But I'm just telling you that I made this in the amount of time that it would have probably taken you to create something that you like out of a seed of one of these first ideas, right? And here's the interesting part, right? Most of these ideas are not good. And it does not matter if you are focused on quality or not, because chances are that most of your ideas will not be good. And that's just part of the creative process. Okay. I have never met anybody, even people who are virtuosos, people who have been doing this for years, who can create good ideas every time they sit in the studio, nor do they expect themselves to, right? Because that's a lot of pressure to be like, oh, I better make something good. This is not great. I got to edit this and make it better and better, versus be like, I just need to make something today, no matter what the quality is. And here's where things get interesting. If we start to go forward, right? So I was doing 3 of these a day. This is probably like a week of material until I got to my first thing that I'm like, hey, I like this. But then look at the second kind of chunk of things, right? Now I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ideas that I like, and one that's 100% moving forward. Okay. And the cool thing about this is that this idea, for example, of whatever the purple one is, this is almost a complete track that I jammed out in the amount of time that it took me to make it. So if it's 5 minutes, it took me 5 minutes to make this thing, and it's significantly better than everything else I've made. So that's where the power of this comes in, is that, hey, when we continue forward, look, I got another one. I got 3 in a row. So that day, something special happened where it just came out seamlessly, right? But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ideas that are 100% I am moving them forward, that are almost complete tracks, all from just jamming out for 20 minutes, 25 minutes a day, right? So again, it just demonstrates that I didn't put any more effort on any of these ideas more than others, right? I just jammed it out and saw what happened. But look at the distribution, right? It is anything but predictable or even. And that's why leveraging this method is so much more freeing, because you don't have the pressure of trying to get this type of idea every time you're sitting down at the studio. But by virtue of you consistently showing up, it just naturally happens. All right. And don't worry, we will focus on quality just later in the process. Okay. But we'll just be doing so from a baseline of having very strong ideas instead of ideas that are like decent and you're like, okay, I like this. No, it's something that's, wow, this is incredible. I'm super excited to move this forward, right? Very different headspace to be approaching moving things forward as you're starting to focus on quality. Okay. And here's a clear and very famous example of this in action. Let's look at the #1 selling album of all time, Thriller by Michael Jackson. It doesn't matter if you like Michael Jackson's music or not. What matters here is the principle. Okay. So Quincy Jones was the producer for this album along with a few other people. And this is his quote that he had regarding the material that made it onto Thriller. Rod and I listened to 800 songs, 30 written by Rod, to get the 9 we used on Thriller. The only criteria being to satisfy our ears. Okay. And this type of approach is exactly what we do in stage 2 of the system. Number 3 is emergence. What the is emergence and how can it help us? Let me explain. Without a doubt, one of the most common problems that musicians and producers face is turning their ideas or loops into full arrangements. Most people don't have trouble coming up with ideas, but constantly hit walls in composing full songs. Of course, there's a ton of tactics that we can use to help us. Music theory, emulating other song structure and arrangement, starting from the point of highest energy and then removing parts to create other sections, but none of that guarantees that you will make a great composition. Here's where emergence comes in. Here's the technical definition straight from Google: the appearance of new properties or species in the course of development or evolution. The most important part of this idea is the new stuff appearing through the process of development. Okay, most creators I talk to try to go directly from an idea that they have to a finished song and fail 9 times out of 10. The reason why is because it implies that idea is good and thus worth developing. This also creates psychological pressure by focusing on the result of a finished song. Okay. I think most people are actually missing a stage in their creative process, which is experimentation and discovery. To give yourself the space to play with your ideas without any expectation. All right. To do this in practice, you want to take your ideas and modify, expand, destroy, lengthen, repeat, duplicate, and reimagine them without worrying about the result. When you allow yourself to engage with the creative act like this with a focus of unrestricted curiosity, guess what tends to happen? Happy accidents, breakthroughs, aha moments, eureka, etc. In other words, emergence, when you notice something of interest through your active participation in a process. This is very different than trying to think up new ideas. Once you have multiple strong ideas and have a sense of direction for where the music wants to go, now it makes sense to start composing a full piece of music. And that's exactly what we do in stage 3 of the system called extract. I'd love for you to drop a comment down below of your number one insight from this video. Now, we just covered the front end of the system, which is the first 3 stages. But in the next video of our series, I'll share with you my proven method to structure your songs for maximum impact without getting stuck. So stay tuned and I will see you in that next video.